All right, guys, welcome back to Wild Outdoor Living. So today we're talking about the fully tested review of my Trek FuelEX 9.8. It's been about a year now. I've ridden it about 400 trail miles. So I've got some thoughts to share with you. So pros with this bike, the cornering and just overall handling is the number one thing that I love about it. It just goes around corners in this kind of fluid, effortless way that just feels really natural. It's not floppy at any time. It just corners really, really well. And so you really enjoy going around corners on it, which I can't say about some other bikes. Even if they go around a corner fast, not necessarily enjoyable. This bike is really enjoyable to go around corners. Its other pro, of course, is its versatility. It's efficient on the flat stuff and just gentle rolling terrain, but then you roll up to a steep, gnarly descent and it feels confident there as well. So pretty much any kind of mountain biking that I approach, I'm not dreading any of it. It's not necessarily the best at any one thing, but I know I'm going to have fun regardless of what I'm doing. Changes that I've made: I bumped the fork up to 150 millimeters. I put a larger volume spacer in the rear shock, swapped to a shorter 40 millimeter stem. And then this isn't necessarily a change, but I went back to running exclusively the carbon wheels, and those have been just fine. So the 150 millimeter fork and the shorter stem did slow the steering down just a little bit, and they raised the bottom bracket just a little bit. Both things I felt were needed. The steering in the beginning was a little bit light, a little bit touchy. Going to that shorter stem and longer fork changed the weight balance a bit and just slowed things down to kind of a more natural effort level. So really liked that. And then the volume spacer in the rear shock gives a little bit more support. In fact, it gives a lot more support, gives a lot more pop out of the rear shock. It does make the rear end a little bit harsh, so that's kind of one of the cons. But I would say if you're going to stick with this shock, I would really recommend it if you want to push the bike hard, because it is easy, even with your sag set up properly, to blow through the travel on this thing in the stock configuration. So down tube storage on this bike is kind of the unique thing to this bike and a couple of other models in Trek's line, and of course Specialized has it as well. It's a feature that is really nice to have, but I don't use it very often, so I wouldn't, if you're looking between two bikes, I wouldn't have this be your main selling point. Definitely look at the rest of the whole package. In terms of cons, besides the shock and the bottom bracket being kind of low out of the box, the chainstay to chain clearance is fairly low, and then your chainring size is limited quite a bit. So if you need a really small chainring, definitely something to keep in mind. You're only going to be able to go as small as 30 on this one, and to be honest, 30 is a real stretch. That's what Trek lists, but the 32 that's on there from stock, I feel is about as small as I would want to go. So the question is, would I buy this bike again? And I would say if I am looking to run a all-around versatile machine, absolutely yes. I would really consider swapping that shock and just budgeting that in, because the handling of this bike is just superb. The fit is superb, and I feel like I can do kind of anything that I want to do on it, and there's really no complaints. I don't have to worry about my bike and worry about if it's going to hold me back in this situation or not. So if I want an all-arounder, I absolutely will either keep this one or possibly swap to a next one. As you guys know, I do work in a bike shop, so selling our bikes every year is kind of normal. If I was going to plan to do, I guess, a full enduro season, I would probably get a bigger bike just to have a little bit more forgiveness, because while this bike really charges hard on the descents, it does feel very taut and very firm in the back end. So it's not quite as forgiving from that point of view. But, with that fork, 65.5-degree head-tube angle, if you're only going to do a couple of enduro races, it's going to do just fine. There are a couple of bikes that I would say would be on my list to compete with it. So the Transition Spur would be on the more, I would say, efficient end of the spectrum. If you're riding more efficient trails and just smoother stuff, I think the Transition Spur is something to really consider over this one, because it is going to be lighter and better pedal efficiency. And then we're really looking forward to that new Trek Slash coming out and seeing what the numbers are on it, because if it's close to as efficient but then offers more capability for the enduro scene, that could be a really good one as well. The other one I would say that competes kind of directly with it, which seems kind of strange, is the Transition Sentinel. So even though it's got quite a bit more travel and it's quite a bit slacker, kind of all the reviews point to that it's definitely more in this all-rounder category, just in terms of the way it's set up and tuned. So those are bikes I would absolutely consider. But if I had to stick with this bike, you know, for an extended period of time, say 5 years, I would say is kind of the life cycle of a full suspension mountain bike. If you're trying to stay on top of the trends, you know, I could absolutely stick on this bike for 5 or even 10 years. And durability wise, I think it's going to hold up, but I also think that I'm going to be able to have fun on it and do everything I need to do for that entire time period. So really a good bike, kind of a safe buy. There's some things I think they could change on it. The knock block is unnecessary. I would like to see a threaded bottom bracket, and I would like to see a steeper seat tube angle in the future. But this bike kind of just has everything you need. You don't have to think about it, and you can just focus on riding cool stuff. So if you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. And until next time, we'll catch you later.